Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third talk in this afternoon block. Third up, we're going to have Nicolle Cysneiros, trying to get that right, speaking about Eita, why internationalization and localization matter. Please welcome Nicolle Cysneiros.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me fine? This is okay. So my name is Nicolle, and I'm here today to talk about internationalization and localization, and why these concepts are important for your applications in general. Does anyone here knows what Eita means? That's in the title? Oh, yeah, okay. So don't worry, it's not a bad language. I know that the standard for learning a new language is to learn the curse words first. That's not the case, don't worry. So it's a Portuguese expression, actually, and it's used when something unexpected happens. And by the end of the talk, you will understand why Eita is in the title of this presentation. And why do I have a Portuguese word in the title of the presentation? Well, because I'm Brazilian, and actually in Brazil, we speak Portuguese, not Spanish. Shocking, I know, but it's Portuguese. And I'm a full-stack developer at LabCodes. I work with Python and Django. In the back end and in the front end, I work with JavaScript, some Angular, some React stuff, and I'm a huge fan of the Python community. I'm part of the Python users group back in my state that's called Pernambuco, and I'm also part of the PyLadies group in my city, Recife. And so Brazil is very huge as the US, so I flagged my city over there in the map. It's a very sunny place. We have a lot of great beaches, so feel welcome to visit anytime that you want some warmer place to be, because here is very cold for me. And as I said, I work at LabCodes, which is a software studio based in Brazil that designs, implements, and scales digital products. We deliver great experiences and build web applications that fit our customers' needs using Python, Django, JavaScript, especially React. Our projects are centered in creating unique solutions and bringing value to their users and therefore to our customers. We have been partnering with US clients for almost 5 years now, and helping a big variety of companies from one-person startups and Y Combinator startups to well-established companies throughout the US. Our team is very talented and recognized worldwide, giving talks like this one, and many conferences and mentoring people. And this is actually my second PyCon. Thanks to the support of LabCodes, they are very helpful. They help me to bring these talks together. They finance me to come here, so it's great. And I will be in the conference until tomorrow, so if you want to talk about LabCodes, ping me. My contact information will be in the last slide. And this year, we are sponsoring PyCon, which is going to happen in October in New York. So I hope I can see some of you lovely folks over there, too. I will be over there. So this is the agenda for this presentation. First, we are going to discuss the definition of internationalization and localization, and why does it matter? Why is it important for your application? And then we will go over some of the internationalization tools that the developers have available to work with their Python and Django applications. Last, but definitely not less important, I will present to you what we were able to do when managing localization, especially translations, in a multi-platform system. Okay, so let's start by addressing the difference between localization and internationalization. Fun fact, I didn't know what I18N and L10N means until like very recently. They are numeronyms, and which means that there are 18 letters between I and N in internationalization. The same for localization. And to be honest, I didn't even know that numeronymous was a thing, but apparently is, and that's what they are. Localization is the process of adapting an application, a product, or even just a document to be more user-friendly to customers from different countries and different cultures. On the other hand, internationalization is the process of making the localization process of a product and application possible. So this is a step of design, of development process. You need to make sure that your application is able to support localization. And as the Django documentation perfectly summarizes, localization is done by translators, while internationalization is done by developers. So here we are going to discuss some tools to help us internationalize our apps and make sure that it's able for translators to localize our apps. However, the simplified definition of internationalization and localization may give the wrong impression that this is just about translations. This process actually entails other adaptations needed in order to make your users more from different countries, from different cultures, to feel more comfortable using your product. I will go over some examples here to illustrate these adaptations. So here is a map usage of different date formats that's used around the globe. The countries colored with cyan use the format day, month, year. The ones colored in yellow, they use the format year, month, day. And the green ones use both those formats, like they interchange between them. And only the USA uses the format month, day, year. This is another map usage. Everything that I'm talking here I took from Wikipedia. This is another map usage, but this one is about number format. So the countries colored in green over there, they use comma as decimal separators and dots as thousand separators. And the countries in blue format the numbers using the other way around, like here, like dot for decimal and comma for thousand separators. So how are you going to show to your user, to your final user, these type of values? Like, how do you know when to format one way and when to format another way? Another example of localization issue is currency conversion. If I'm browsing through Amazon, back in my place, I want to see the price of products in Brazilian real, that's our currency, not in dollar. Dollar doesn't make sense for me. So it's important to provide prices and other values converted to your local users. They should be able to know what they are paying for. Another interesting adaptation is bidirectional text and Unicode character support. It's a very common issue and when bringing your application international. In this example, we can see how the Wikipedia page adapts to different languages. So here we have the common Wikipedia page for English language, and we can notice all the basic elements of the page, like the navigation sidebar is on the left, as we usually see. However, if you change the same page for Arabic, we can notice that the navigation bar migrated to the right side, because this language is reading from right to left instead of left to right. So you can see that all the elements in the page had to change, to mutate in order to adapt to the culture of people that speaks Arabic. There are several other aspects that they need to take into consideration when localizing your apps. Conversion of measures between metric and imperial systems, for instance, legal requirements that may be different from country to country, sorting and presenting a list may be different, The way addresses and personal names are formatted, like family name goes first or last. Depends on the country. Time zone, calendar, and special holidays too. Like, you need to take this into consideration. And yes, I know that we, as developers, are so used to write code and documentation in English that we may not realize that there are only like 360 million native English speakers people in the world, and that only represents like less than 5% of the world population. And I know that it's very useful to have a common language for the communication between developers, but regarding your final user of the products that we are developing, English may not be that useful after all. And in fact, from the top 10 countries with most people using the internet, like only one is a native English-speaking country. This is at least from 2017. So if you want to grab that share of the market, you need to go international. You need to be able to internationalize your app. Okay, so I hope that at this point, I have convinced you how important it is. And now I'm going to show you how we can do that with Python. Let's go to review some tools that we can use that can help us with this task. Starting with the new getText package that's from the translation project. This package offers a runtime library that supports the retrieval of translated messages. A set of conventions about how programs should be written to support message catalogs, and a library supporting the parsing and the creation of files containing translated messages. So how does it work? Let's say that we have a simple Hello World app here called Eita app.py, where we are using the getText Python module to create a text domain for our app over there. Like, we are creating a text domain. We are saying where the translations is going to be held, the locale folder. And down here, when we are saying our greeting, we are flagging that string as translatable. So if you run this code, it's going to print hello world as expected. Like, it's not going to break because you don't have another translation for this code. So after you flagged your string to be translatable, the new module, they offer a tool that can collect all the strings that you marked as translatable in your code and generate a PO file containing all the strings that must be translated. So this is the method. It's xgetText. It's a command line tool that you can run, saying what's the domain that you created, which is our Eita app, and what's the input file. The PO file that this method is going to generate contains a list of all the entries that we flagged as translatable. And this is the basic structure for an entry in the PO file. We may have some comments for the translator, trying to give some sort of context for them, like the word May. We can say that this is May the month, or May from the word May, from the verb. It's a verb? Yeah, it's a verb. We can also add some references, some flags for the string. Then we have entry ID, which is the untranslated string that's going to remain untranslated. And we have the entry string that's going to be the translated string. So when we run the command xgetText in the command line, passing our Eita app.py file, this is the PO file that comes back. At the top of the file, we have some metadata about the file. We have some information about the project, some information about the translation process. The idea of the PO file is that it should be readable for both developers and the translators. So we have that meta tag information over there. And down here, we have even a reference for where the code, where in the code the string came from. It's in line 7. And then we have our entry. Once we have our PO file done, we can start translating our terms for different languages. In this example, I'm translating the simple app to Portuguese. So I copied the PO file generated by the xgetText command and started to translate my terms. And then I followed the recommended structure for my domain and my different languages that I want to support. So I have a folder for all the English domain PO files that I want to support, and then I create another one for the language Portuguese. If I want to give support for French, I would need another folder and yet another PO file for French language. Okay, now I have 2 PO files for the 2 links that I want to support in my app, organized in this specific directory hierarchy as recommended by the GNU module. So in order to use now the translated strings in my code, I need to compile the PO file, that's a portable object file, into a MO file, which is a machine object file. And this is done by this tool in the GNU module, which is the message formatting tool. I pass what's the output file, which is going to be the MO and the PO that I'm compiling. When I run this for all my PO files, now I should have this structure for each language. I should have my MO and my PO file. Now, with my PO files compiled, I can now install the translation for the desired language in the getText tool in our Python code. So the translation method is able to find the correct MO file based on our directory structure, the domain text, that's Eita app, and the language that I passed as parameter. So now, if I run this code, passing the language Portuguese, Portuguese from Brazil, I'm able to get Olá Mundo instead of Hello World. That's the translated string. Another useful internationalization service in the Python module is the Python locale module. This module has access to the POSIX locale database and is especially handy for formatting dates, numbers, and currency. Let's take a look at this example where we are trying to translate, to format a date, number, and currency using the locale library. Here, I'm importing the module. I'm changing all locale settings to English from the US and retrieving the locale conventions. This locale conventions is an object that contains all the conventions for the language in that country, such as decimal separator, thousand separator, currency symbol. We have all this in that object. Then I proceed to format my given date and price. Just let's say it's a price application, I don't know. And using the locale format method, I can format my number without worrying about the decimal and thousand separator symbols. The same effect I can accomplish on the date format by passing the %x directive to the date format function. And this is the output if I run that for English in the US. I have my date in the format that's used here, month, day, year. And the decimal separator is a dot, while the thousand separator is a comma. And also, I have the $ representing the US dollar currency. Now, if I take the same code, but just changing the locale to Portuguese Brazil, just changing that parameter passing in that set locale function over there, I already have a different output. Now I have my date and my number and my currency following the conventions of Brazil. The date is formatted as day, month, year, and we have comma as the decimal separator, dots as the thousand separator, and we have the R plus the $sign, which represents our currency. Okay, now, since I'm here to spread the word about internationalization, I want just to give like a tiny overview on how we can accomplish this on Django. With the framework, we are able to serve our content, to serve our web content based on, in different languages based on the accept language header that the browser adds to our request object. So we are able to change depending on the end user. We need to know that language in order to return what they are expecting. For translations, we can flag translatable strings in both Python and template code. In the Python code, we can use the standard getText function and all the other getText module-related functions that we already saw for Python code. For the Python part, it works in the Django part. One interesting feature of Django, though, is that we can have lazy translations, which is great because we can flag a string that will only be translated when the value is used in a string context, such as in the plain Henry. So this is especially useful for translating help text and verbose names in our modules, for example. On the other hand, we can use some special tags in our template code once you load the internationalization tag. We have the trans tag that translates just a single string, while the block trans is able to mark as translatable a block of strings in your template. To be honest, this slide covers only like 10% of the features available for translation in Django. It's not the point of this presentation. I just want to give you a highlight, and you can check the documentation. They have everything explained there. It's very good. So go check it out if you want more details on how to use these features. The Django admin command line already has some facilitations for the whole process of generating a PO file and compiling the PO file. Already puts everything in that folder structure as recommended by the GNU project. So it does everything for you automatically. It has some commands that does this for you. Another support that we have from Django is related to time zones. When time zone support is activated in your Django settings, that means that Django will store datetime objects in the UTC format, in the UTC time zone, in the database, and uses only time zone-aware datetime objects in the code. So because these datetime objects now are time zone-aware, Django is able to format the date and the time according to the time zone of your end user. So that's great. Okay, now that I presented some tools that can help us internationalize our apps, I want to share with you a challenge that we came across back at LabCodes last year, which was to support localization in a cross-platform system. To illustrate what I mean by cross-platform thing, I put together this diagram. Basically, we have, in the front-end part of the system, native apps for iOS and Android. We also have a web-based app acting as a controller for those native mobile apps. We have a middleware that's written in Java. And this middleware consumes from some services from the API. And also, this API powers the data for our web app. As you can see, we have different technologies powering each piece of the whole system. And believe me, Java, Swift, the Android SDK, they don't use PO file to translate their messages as their message catalog. Each one of them has their own file format. So that's the part where we came as a group, as a team, and we said, Eita. Yeah, we were in trouble in this part, like how are we going to manage all this? It's all fun, it's all cool, and you have just your Python code over there, you work with Django, and it's doing everything for you. But this time, we were in trouble. So our goal was to collect the translatable strings from all those parts and send them to be translated by a team of translators. These translators would use a localization platform to translate the terms. Yeah, let's face it, that PO file to change a lot of strings wouldn't be the most fun thing to do. But we have several localization platforms. This is just like the top 6 that I got back from the Google search. And they usually have, like all of them, I'm not sure if all of them, but they usually offer a nice API integration with the system in order for you to automate your process of sending all those terms, getting back the translations, and doing the whole flow. So I don't really have any preferences. I worked with Transifex for this project, but like, just pick one. Like it's not, I don't have many opinion about this, but choose one. We have several. So in order to do this, in order to send everything there, and we came up with several different API services that would parse the different formats of message catalog files. So we have our PO file from our web-based platform. We also have PO file for the API part. We have the strings.xml for the Android native app. We have the localizable.strings file for the iOS app, and the messages.properties for the Java middleware part. So the API services had different services to handle and parse each one of those, since they have different formats, so we have to deal with different parsing methods. And then the API would then aggregate these terms once we parsed everything, and store it in a local data store. In this case, we are using Redis just for performance's sake, but it can be any data store, actually. And why we use a data store for this is because we don't want every time that someone sends a file to send all the terms to the localization platform. We want to avoid this bulk process, and if we are not like sending only the difference, the things that are being added or updated. So with the local data store, we are able to control this better and only send actually the terms that needs to be updated or added to the localization platform. In the API, we are also able to kind of aggregate the same terms that have in different platforms. So for instance, a button that says cancel, that's in every front-end platform. So that cancel, we will only send one cancel string to the localization platform, and the translator wouldn't need to translate cancel 3 times. It's useless. So the API also does this cleaning process in the terms. And once the aggregation is done, the API now sends the terms to the localization platform using the API integration. And now all the terms are available for the translators to do their magic and translate everything. Also, these integrations, they also allow to send all those comments and all those context information that we can pass along to facilitate the work of our translators. OK, now we have the terms over there. Now the translators can do their job, they translate, and once the translation is done, our job now is to make these translated terms back to the platform. So the API does the same process, but in reverse. Now we get the translated terms from the API, we format them into the correct file format for each platform, and make them available for each developer, for each core team that's responsible for each one of them. There are some localization platforms that have a type of webhook that they can actually signal your API to inform you that the translation is done, and you can do this automatically. And you can look for something similar. And yeah, now we have this basic flow working. Like, we have all the way to send the translations to the platform, and to send the terms to the platform, and get the translations back. But this is not all. We also needed to review our deploy process, because now we needed to adjust our process to accommodate the translation process in between. So each platform now has to update the terms, send all the new terms that they want to send to the platform when they go to QA. We use the process of QA our system. So whenever they are ready for a QA deploy, they send all the terms to be translated. And the QA team now has to perform integration tests for different locales. And all these features is only approved to go to production once they are tested, and once also all the strings are translated. So this is a slightly difference in our deploy process. Now we have to take into consideration not only our team to be ready, but also the translators team to be ready to translate everything. And this solution that I just described, they have been in place since last year, and so far it has been working. The team seems to be adjusted with the whole process of deploying, signalizing the translators, and the communications is well established. So it's working so far, not a big deal, not many problems. However, now we have a new challenge coming. Something that I omit from the presentation of the platform is that about 60% of the data presented to the user actually comes from different data sources over there. And I'm not going into too many details about our ETL process of extracting, transforming, and loading this information into our API. However, it's important to notice that this data is constantly changing. So yeah, our next challenge is how we can manage these terms in an organic and performatic way. But this has to go to another talk because we are still planning. We have like a huge question mark in our heads right now. We are in planning stage, and maybe next year I can come here with another talk and tell you what's the result of this huge plan. And yeah, that's it, folks. I was able to show you, I hope that I was able to show you how important localization and internationalization is. And I believe that the main lesson from this is that internationalization is a fundamental step in design and development process. Don't do like we did. We took months to flag all the strings and to internationalize each one of those platforms. The whole team was a group effort that took months until we came up with this solution. And don't do this. If you are in the beginning of your development process, or if you are thinking of starting one, taking internationalization into consideration. Even though you don't have big plans of going international, believe me, you want to go. And it's better to be ready now when the opportunity comes, and you can do this without being a pain in the neck, as it was for me. So be warned. Hope you do this. And yeah, thanks a lot, and obrigada. Yeah.
Hey, great talk, thank you. Did you ever had to deal with the migration of a Django app from Python 2 to Python 3 at any point? And how did you deal with internationalization with that? You know?
Actually, we were already working with Python 3
Oh, that's great.
when we did the internationalization process.
Okay.
We did that process before. I'm trying to think if we had, like, this was also like, it was very close, the transformation, the parsing. I'm trying to think if we had any apps that were at the same time, but I don't think so. I think I had everything in Python 3 before doing the internationalization process. Yeah, so it was okay.
Okay. Were there any issues that you faced during internationalization?
Oh, yes, actually. There is one that didn't get into the talk. It was about the IDs, because when you generate the PO file, the string that you flagged comes as an ID. And we actually had to use well-formatted IDs like camel case or something like this, because we would have like collisions of terms that didn't mean the same thing. So we had to go over all the IDs. That was a challenge too.
So when it comes to internationalizing an application, I imagine that maybe getting the last 5 to 10% is the hardest part, because there might be different edge cases to handle. Like, for example, one case you can imagine is maybe the translations aren't just single string replacements, but maybe they're strings that have like substitution areas for like a number or something like that, or plural or singular. And I'm wondering if you can talk about some of these harder edge cases to completely internationalize an application.
Yeah, like we had to do this for pluralization, as they called. Like, we had to treat these edgy cases on like feminine and masculine terms, plurals in our text, and in those different, and each of these cases is treated differently in the PO file and all those other files for all the other platforms. So it came down to sitting and establishing how we are going to handle those edgy cases for translating. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks for the talk. It was really cool. I wondered if you could talk a bit more about the QA process that you use to sort of like make sure that what's coming back from an external service is legitimately what you wanted to translate. Is that people internal who speak the language that are going over every line? And how do you sort of make sure that there's not English strings sneaking through and that kind of side of things?
Yeah, kind of this, like, because our QA team is not that big and we don't have people that speak both languages. For this project, we were supporting Canada, French-Canadian, but like our QA team didn't know any French because it's based in the US. But like, we looked for English terms when we were doing the QA process, and overall, we trusted the translators because, like, we had to separate our concerns. If we were able to check everything, we couldn't trust our translators. So we trusted them, but, like, testing everything, like, we look for English, maybe some terms that didn't get translated. But yeah, that's basically it. And it's quite a pain to do this at first, but as I mentioned, the team seems to be adapted well so far. So now we already know how French works, and then when we change, we are able to spot on any errors quickly, more quickly than before.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks.
So I was curious about like the CSS styling and how you handled that, like when things need to show up on the opposite side of the page. Did you guys have any of those cases, and like how did you end up handling that? Yeah,
we had a special case for CSS translation, and we actually didn't translate in the CSS file. We actually got back to JavaScript. So there was something that we had in a before text in the CSS file that we were like, okay, we can't do that. And I actually we didn't spend much time researching. We were just like, okay, let's change back to JavaScript for this part, since we already had JavaScript enabled and doing a lot of things for CSS, and then worked with that. And we already worked with JavaScript translations in our front end. We had Django. Django also supports JavaScript. They have a catalog that they send back. And also in Angular, this project also had a tiny bit little bit in Angular. So we also supported that. So we ended up shifting from CSS to JavaScript.
And I just want to make sure I understand your whole flow here. So you have like translation tools that you're using kind of in all these different languages, and then you're passing the config files like from your backend, like through your API to these different services in different languages. Is that correct?
Actually, we only have one platform for the translation process. And what we do, we grab all those files and not compress, but aggregate them and pass to a single platform. So the translators, they only have to work in a single platform. Transifex, I believe that all of them do, but Transifex supports like several languages for the same set of strings. So we have the French translators, but at any time they could add another, like, I don't know, German translator team to work in the same platform. So we don't need to have a different platform for different translator teams. We only have one.
Okay, so it's like you're really dependent on like the back end to translate. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Like, but we have these services that's kind of an isolated service is in our API, so we can now we may migrate to another platform. So now we just need to change that to integrate with a different API, but like they are very similar. So like the API is responsible for generating that file that goes to the front-end applications, for each one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
How do you determine your user's preferred time zone?
Sorry, can you repeat?
How do you determine your user's preferred time zone?
Preferred time zone. I don't think that we do, because I know that we take from the accept language. But since we store everything in UTC, because we don't work with date that much, so we store everything in UTC, and we do this based on the location. We do have a time zone part of the process that we use Moment.js in the front end, and we are able to get the location of the user in the front end in the browser from the Moment.js library, and then we format that data in that. So the API sends everything UTC, and then in the front end part, we do the conversion using that information. Yeah, I forgot about that Moment.js part, but we do that.
All right, well, thank you very much.